in the squadron. They called him Bullets, but we call him Greg Kelly. Greg Kelly is on the air
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
It's very celebratory because we're almost there. Uh-oh. Israel just launched the biggest strike yet on Beirut. Haven't they gotten the email? Peace. All we are saying is give peace a chance. President Trump worked on this deal. We got a deal. Tentative, whatever. But it's a deal. I like it. We can work with this. He wins. He wins again. Don't mess with us. We won't mess with you. A ceasefire. A ceasefire. A 14. I love it. I love it. It's good. It's great, actually. These Iranians were going totally crazy towards the end. I mean, crazy. The stuff that they were doing to their own people, sending them out onto military targets, and stand on the military target, stand on this bridge the Americans might bomb so that what are you thinking is going to happen? Why would you put children in the middle of it? This is their version of David Muir on the Iranian TV network, right? Listen to what he's saying here. All right, this is Iranian state TV that we allowed to be on TV because we're good like that. Cut one, please. Cut one.
No. Mothers, fathers, take your children by the hand and come out to the streets. Do you want your son to become a man? Let him feel like he's a hero in the battlefield, commanding the battle. Mothers and fathers, send your children at night to the roadblocks. These children will turn into men.
Whoa. Don't take your kids home and tuck them in. Take them out into the war zone, right there on the bridge, right there at the power plant. And it's okay to bomb power plants and bridges. All right, that's not a war crime. Hey, I found something. You know, it's an American president sounding an awful lot like President Trump, and they thought this guy was a hero. Harry S. Truman, right after we dropped the big one, and he hinted that we were prepared to drop even more big ones. Cut 3, please. Cut 3.
We are now prepared to destroy more rapidly and completely every productive enterprise the Japanese have in any city. We shall destroy their docks, their factories, and their communications. Let there be no mistake. We shall completely destroy Japan's power to make war.
How about that one? And that was kind of awesome and necessary. I know we are conflicted about nuclear weapons and the dropping the big one, but it had to be done back then. I'm not advocating nuclear war, but I am advocating taking out their capacity to wage war. And if you guys want a way out, we can work with you. We can work with you. Smarten up. Do the right thing. We'll even preserve your dignity. You know, you have to do that. You have to worry about, and both sides have to do that. Everybody has to win something here. All right? And this goes back thousands of years. There was an ancient Chinese warrior philosopher named Sun Tzu. His book, The Art of War, is still, it's interesting. I never realized The Art of War, The Art of the Deal, The Art of War, The Art of the Deal, right? The Art of the War, The Art of the Deal, President Trump's book, Sun Tzu's book. A lot of very interesting things are in The Art of the Deal and Art of the War. Anyway, what does he say in Art of the War? He says you have to allow your enemy to save face. You have to build your enemy, your opponent, a golden bridge. You got to build your enemy a golden bridge. After you wipe out all their bridges, you got to build them a golden bridge for them to retreat on. You have to worry about that. It's part of the calculus. I hear a lot of people saying this morning, I mean, really, you got to be wacko to think this. Trump caved. Eradicated their leadership, eradicated their Navy and Air Force. Their missile capacity is nearly gone. Whatever nuclear they have, the enriched uranium, we know exactly where it is. They're not putting it in. They're not installing it in nuclear weapons or missiles. We have won completely. Now, the Strait of Hormuz thing, it really wasn't on our agenda at the top of it. Who knew that some of our enemies will, basically try to commit economic suicide? But the yelling and screaming about President Trump and war crimes and, 25th Amendment, that's another one. 25th Amendment. The 25th Amendment. The 25th Amendment means you remove the president because he's crazy. If there was ever a case to do that, it was Joe Biden, and you failed. Let's see what else. Cut 4, if you don't mind. Mainstream media.
If you attack all power plants in the country, that's a war crime.
These are actually the words of potential war criminals.
He's not shy about it, right? He screams that he's committing war crimes.
So that was all in reaction to the bridges and power plants, right? And if you watch any movie about any war, where do they blow up? I'm talking about movies about pilots. I'm talking about Flight of the Intruder, Bridge over the River Kwai. What's that other one? What is that other one? The Bridges at Toko-Ri. The Bridges at Toko-Ri, a great movie, and they go to knock out the bridges. The idea that was a war crime, that was a great, great movie, by the way. It reminds me about a lot of things. Now, there's reminds me of how great America is, actually. And the guy who is the fighter pilot, who I don't want to give it away, but it's very emotional at the end. He was a fighter pilot during World War II, gets out of the military. He's a lawyer, and then they call him back to active duty to be a jet pilot in the Navy during the Korean War. You know, calling all men and boys. It was he didn't really want to do it, but he did it for his country. There is I can't call it fake news. I cannot accuse the New York Times of fake news. I want to. They often are guilty of fake news. But every now and then they have information that you can't just dismiss. Why do I say that? Because President Trump talks to these people. I know it. I know it firsthand. I've seen it. Maggie Haberman is the New York Times White House reporter, one of them. I think she does special projects right now. And the other guy is Jonathan Swan. They're very obnoxious, very stuck on themselves, and they make all kinds of mistakes. And they have both been openly disrespectful to President Trump. I've seen that. Jonathan Swan, famously. And then Maggie Haberman, she's terrible. But I understand a little bit, like if I'm in a room full of journalists, and I'm not very often, but when I am, we know the same people. I know, we work possibly together at one time or another. I know them. For all their faults, they're generally well-informed about gossip and what's happening in the moment, so you find yourself talking to them. They're often dull, but sometimes they're interesting, and I think President Trump likes a breath of fresh air, and he'll talk to these people. And it looks to me like the president and his cabinet all opened up to tell Maggie and Jonathan what was going on. And they go around the table, and there are quotes from this sensitive meeting, and it's obvious that people in the meeting talk to these reporters. Now, one thing though that they're drawing a negative conclusion on, and basically they go around the table, and it's not that interesting, but this is the part that I find that you may hear more about. They talk about Benjamin Netanyahu, Bibi, going to the White House with his top guy, his top Mossad guy, and they sit down in the Situation Room, and they basically talk about the need to go to war with Iran, and they make a case for an hour. And this is dynamite news for the new breed of, I don't know what the hell it is. I don't know what the podcast bros, especially the anti-Semitic ones. Oh, you see, Israel's calling the shots. They told President Trump to do it. I read this story, and that's how it's actually I think that's how it's going to be presented. That's when we see the whole thing. It's going to come out in a book. No, that's not what actually happened. I looked at it carefully, and I realized something. There's Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump in the Situation Room in the White House, and there are about a dozen other people in there. Hegseth, Marco Rubio, Susie Wiles, John Radcliffe, the CIA director, people like that, heavyweights, right? And you've got Bibi Netanyahu, another heavyweight. And I thought, President Trump has known Bibi Netanyahu since before some of these people in his entourage were even born. Bibi Netanyahu I remember watching that guy when he was at the United Nations when I was a kid. He's been around forever. He's been prime minister of Israel, numerous times, right? He was president, he was prime minister, then they arrested him, and then he was, ambassador again, and then he comes back. I don't understand Israeli politics. It's very topsy-turvy over there. But the man has been around the block. And I also know this because I read these books that nobody else does. And this is ultimately going to be a book that no one's going to read. And they're all going to just go with the Cliff Note version. Jared Kushner was personal friends with Bibi Netanyahu when he was growing up. In fact, Bibi was like on a speaking tour of the United States, stayed over Jared Kushner's house when Jared was a kid, like in 8th grade, and Bibi was there. Bibi, Jared slept on the couch. Bibi slept in Jared's room. It was just pretty wild. Now, I say that just to point out that if Bibi comes in with a pitch, it's not all about that pitch. It underscores a bunch of things to me, that President Trump has more sophistication, more savvy, more information than all of the advisors on his side combined, quite frankly. 12 years ago, and this is not to disparage anybody. This is just how it works. 12 years ago, the CIA director, John Ratcliffe, was the mayor of Heath, Texas. Population 9,000. Do you think he was forming opinions about Netanyahu and Iran and all that stuff back then? No, he wasn't. What's his name? 15 years ago, what was Hegseth doing? Not much. Filling in on Fox and Friends weekend every now and then. J.D. Vance, 15 years ago, was 25 years old. I think he might have been in law school at that point, or I think he was in college, actually. He was at Ohio State. He started college late. President Trump has been studying this stuff and studying people, and it didn't come down to that one pitch from Bibi. He also knows Bibi. He knows when Bibi is lying. He knows when Bibi is wrong. He knows when Bibi is right. He knows when Bibi is desperate. They have decades of experience around each other. He also is checking in with about 15 other billion sensors and information avenues. He's got all of this situational awareness that is basically off the charts. Now, at one point, he basically says, we're going to do it. I don't know if Bibi's in the room or not. And somebody's, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure about this? Yeah, it'll work out. It always does. It's a powerful line. It always does. At this point, how many fixes, how many jams has President Trump been in? And it always works out. There's something very special going on here. There really is. Some might use the word anointed, right? I'm not saying he's a deity, but I'm saying all of this is sanctioned by God, right? If you look in the Bible, these leaders, they would not have, they don't let this kind of leadership happen. They let it happen with a purpose. And I just don't think it's possible or conceivable that God is going to abandon President Trump now, or I have faith in him. I have total and complete faith in him. I can advise, I can root, and I'm one of the voices, quite frankly, that's out there. God has shaped me in certain ways and allowed certain things to happen and given me certain experiences. And when the phone does ring, I say what I think and I say what I feel and I say what I know. And I often have to admit I always have to admit it's not as much as he knows. Just astounding to me, these podcast guys go on and they think they know how to run the world. They've run a podcast and they've been a member of the United States Navy 20 years ago. 20 years ago. One of the hottest podcasters in the world right now, Sean Ryan, was in the Navy 20 years ago. The way he talks, you think he got out last week. All that Navy paraphernalia all over the place, right? How does that guy become such a big podcaster? I found out something interesting. You know who sponsors that show? The Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, is now buying podcast airtime. Reminds me of something else. Reminds me of the CIA buying off networks, buying off newspapers, keeping people on the payroll. People possibly, I've heard it before as a theory. I do not know it. I know that they did pay people. I know that they did pay newspaper and broadcast. And I know that they named and paid big people. But I don't know for sure if one of them was Bob Woodward. Okay, Bob Woodward, who broke, quote unquote, broke the Watergate story. Let's see if there's anything else. The ceasefire, the 10 points. Don't worry about the 10 points. Don't worry. You remember I told you that they were going to let that foreign minister guy live? There was a foreign minister guy, Aragoshi, and I kept seeing him on the fake news. I saw him on Meet the Press. I saw him on Face the Nation, Deface the Nation. I saw him on all those shows. And I'm like, why is this guy alive? He's part of the leadership because he's reasonable and we can work with him. All right. He's not as fanatical as the others. He is still alive, and it's his name that's on this this agreement that we're going to have a ceasefire. People are seizing on the 10 points in the plan. This is just what they're asking for. We're asking for stuff. They're asking for stuff. We're going to come together. There's going to be a middle ground. This morning, Hegseth and Kane had a little briefing there at the Pentagon. I think we have some clips. Doesn't really matter. I just want to go through some of the clips. You got them? Let's, Justin has them. All right. Well, give me one of them if you don't mind. Thank you. All right. Well, let's start with 15.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary and General Kane. Mary Margaret with the Daily Wire. 2 questions. Iran has said that safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be possible in coordination with Iran's armed forces and, quote, technical limitations. What do you believe that means? And then we've also heard reports that Iran has continued striking targets well into this morning. At what point are we beyond a grace period? Are we giving them a grace period? Is there a miscommunication there? What's going on with that?
What we know is that Iran is going to say a lot of things. A lot of people are going to say a lot of things, claim a lot of things. What has been agreed to, what's been stated, is the strait is open. Our military is watching. I'm sure their military is watching, but commerce will flow. And that's what you saw the markets react to, is that reality. As far as shooting that, we were monitoring it last night in real time. Of course we are. Iran would be wise to find a way to get the carrier pigeon to their troops out in remote locations.
Not a bad answer. Not a bad answer. Good job. We'll be right back.
Greg Kelly.
Let's go, Brandon.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Greg Kelly.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Rex Hoyerman. James Flippin will have details on that. The guy pled guilty. Wow. All right, I want James to give us everything here. All right. Now, some other things that have come up. I am just so relieved, aren't you? I mean, this time yesterday, 24 hours ago, I had the brilliant General Blaine Holt telling me don't go out tonight. He told all of us, if you don't have to socialize tonight, if you don't have to go out, stay home. Maybe have some extra supplies around the house. He was worried about terrorism, those terrorist cells that are undoubtedly here. We let 5 million people in illegally. Let's see here. Anything else? The big briefing so far today. I think I should go to President Trump's Truth, though. The Truth. Have you downloaded Truth? I like Truth. Truth is better than the others. Marjorie Trader Brown's green turns to brown under stress. Seat in Congress has been taken over by a wonderful and talented man, Clay Fuller. Yeah, Marjorie Greene. You know, I did notice Marjorie Taylor Greene, she was so upset that President Trump used the F word on Easter. And first of all, he wasn't wishing us a happy Easter. Happy effing Easter. He wasn't saying that. It was a message to our enemy. And I remember that Marjorie Taylor Greene had a foul mouth and used to say the most vile things about Joe Biden. And granted, I'm right there with you, but did she have to say the F word? Did she have to use those terms to talk about Joe Biden on social media and the rest? She was she could be very ugly. Very ugly. Okay. Also from President Trump, moments ago, numerous agreements, lists, and letters are being sent out by people that have absolutely nothing to do with the USA-Iran negotiation. In many cases, they are total fraudsters, charlatans, and worse. They will be rapidly exposed after our federal investigation is opened. There is only one group of meaningful points that are acceptable to the United States, and we will be discussing them behind closed doors during these negotiations. These are the points that are the basis on which we agreed to a ceasefire. It is something that is reasonable and can very easily be dispensed with. It's very much like fake news CNN last night headlining a source that had no power or authority to write a letter claiming great authority. President Donald J. Trump. Let's see here. What else do we got? A country supplying military weapons to Iran will be immediately tariffed on any and all goods. All right, good for them. So, yeah, there are some words here that we have agreed to give up all of our bases in the region. No, that's impossible. We would never do that. Now, how do you define region, though, right? I mean, it's just, this is the kind of game you play. We're not getting rid of our boats in Bahrain. Would we cut our exercises in the Persian Gulf from 5 to 3? Maybe. Maybe we would do something like that. Do they want money to fix broken stuff? Maybe we would do something like that. These are things that can be worked on. Let's see a little bit more. The United States will work closely with Iran, which we have determined has gone through what will be a very productive regime change. There will be no enrichment of uranium, and the United States will, working with Iran, dig up and remove all of the deeply buried B-2 bombers' nuclear dust. Dig up and remove all of the deeply buried B-2 bombers' nuclear dust. Okay, deeply buried. It is now and has been under very exacting satellite surveillance. Space Force! Nothing has been touched from the date of the attack. We are and will be talking tariff and sanctions relief with Iran. Many of the 15 points have already been agreed to. Thank you for your attention to this matter. What else? From Lindsey Graham. He just reports that he had a great conversation with POTUS. I told him I totally support his ultimatum to the Iranian regime change, blah, 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 blah. That's all good. That's all good. I think we're there. And there's also a link to the press conference that Hegseth had with Kane. So let's go back to that for a second, if you don't mind. All right. Look, sometimes that Dan Kane is very measured. Now, this is a little, I'm not nitpicking here, but behind the scenes, it's said that he actually doesn't tell the president like what he thinks is right. He presents the president with options. He says, maybe you want to do this, maybe you want to do that. It's my job to present the president with options. And when the president says, well, what do you think we should do? Well, we have this option, we have that option. He won't lean on one or the other. Sometimes it's a little bit opaque. And I've seen that before with the military. They're a little bit, there's a happy median. Milley thought he was like basically the president. He had the right idea and he would take a position and advocate for it. And, there's a little bit of both. You have to maybe do some advocacy, but you also have to present optionality. That's the new way we say choices, by the way. Optionality. Optionality. He presents optionality, but he doesn't have many opinions. All right. This is that meeting I was telling you guys about. Netanyahu in the Situation Room. February 11, Netanyahu had tried to focus the minds of the Americans assembled in the cabinet room on the existential threat posed by Iran's 86-year-old supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. When others in the room asked the prime minister about possible risks in the operation, Mr. Netanyahu acknowledged these but made one central point. In his view, the risks of inaction were greater than the risks of action. He argued that the price of action would only grow if they delayed striking and allowed Iran more time to accelerate its missile production and create a shield of immunity around its nuclear program. Everyone in the room understood that Iran had the capacity to build up its missile and drone stockpiles at a far lower cost and more quickly than the United States could build and supply the much more expensive interceptors to protect American interests and allies in the region. Now, that's interesting. Yes, we can take down drones, but we only have so many of those systems, and we only have so much ammunition for those systems. You can pump out the drones far more easily than we can come up with the defenses. Very interesting. Mr. Netanyahu's presentations and Mr. Trump's positive response to them created an urgent task for the U.S. intelligence community. Overnight, analysts worked to assess the viability of what the Israeli team had told the president. And then the intelligence officials with deep expertise, they all come together and they break down Netanyahu's presentation. The first thing they agreed with Netanyahu on, that they could kill the Ayatollah. The second was they could cripple Iran's capacity to project power and threaten its neighbors. The third thing that Netanyahu was advocating, a popular uprising inside Iran. And the fourth was regime change, with the secular leader installed to govern the country. Now, the U.S. officials assessed the first two objectives were achievable with American intelligence and military power. They assessed that the third and fourth parts of what Netanyahu wanted, getting rid of the regime and a popular uprising, They thought that was totally detached from reality. Again, this is what the intelligence community comes up with. And I'm sure, to be honest, it wasn't as cut and dried. But let's see. When Mr. Trump joined the meeting, Mr. Ratcliffe briefed him on the assessment. The CIA director used one word to describe the Israeli prime minister's regime change scenarios. Farcical. I don't like that word, farcical. It's a farce, right? It's a joke. And good for Marco Rubio. In other words, it's BS, he said. Ratcliffe added, Ratcliffe, again, the CIA director, that given the unpredictability of events in any conflict, regime change could happen, but it should not be considered an achievable objective. Happened day one. Several others jumped in, including Vice President Vance, just back from Azerbaijan, who expressed strong skepticism about the prospect of regime change. The president then turned to General Kane. This is the part that kind of gets me. General, what do you think? And, he goes on and on about, it's not my turn, it's not my time, not my place. But finally he says this. In my experience, standard operating procedure for the Israelis, they oversell and their plans are not always well developed. They know they need us, and that's why they're hard selling. Now, that's very interesting for me, coming from, and this is where it clicked. Netanyahu is known far better by President Trump than by Dan Kane. And Dan Kane is a four-star general. That's very impressive. He became a four-star general moments ago, really. Dan Kane is a couple of months older than I am. It's like when he was a captain, I was a captain. When he was a major, I was a major. When he was lieutenant colonel, I was lieutenant colonel. I know what lieutenant colonels and majors worry about, right? They don't worry about the Ayatollah Khamenei and, Israel's designs on taking Iran out. They don't. They may dabble in it at these command and staff colleges and stuff like that, but they don't really develop strategic minds. And I'm sorry to say that, but it's true. Now, you can get a crash course in it once you get above the rank of colonel, but often that's not enough time. And I'll tell you the first person who put this on I don't want to say his name, but it's a three-star general who was very upfront about his strengths and limitations, right? And too often we confuse leaders in the military for these grand strategists when they really are tactical people. And I wonder that. It's a question. But anyway, look, we have a deal. No one's shooting at anybody right now for the most part, right? For the most part. And that is glorious. And I think this thing is going to hold. And even if it slips, and there's a good chance it will, we're on the right track. God bless President Trump. Be right back.
Greg Kelly
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Greg Kelly, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
All right, sorry. That is a very beautiful picture of Earth. Finally, they put out the decent pictures. You remember the first couple of days, Artemis, and it was just these little gray smudges almost. And now it's beautiful. It's actually overwhelmingly beautiful. I hope we got a lot out of this mission. I mean, we didn't really come all that close to the moon, but we haven't seen some of these pictures we've never seen before, where you have basically the full moon and you got the Earth behind it. The curvature of the moon and the curvature of the Earth. It's pretty wild. I don't know why they're so stingy. We have this satellite up there right now, and it's always going around. Hey, another thing. It's not for nothing, but that's a little messy inside that space capsule. You see that netting like it's some boat? They got like all their stuff behind. It looks on the Staten Island Ferry. You ever been on the Staten Island Ferry and they got their light preservers behind the nets? That's kind of what it looks like. These great big nets. Hey, whatever it takes. And they're happy up there. That's beautiful. Beautiful pictures. And the next time we go, we don't fool around. It's not like we are going to practice this 15 times and then land on the moon. You practice. Artemis 1 had nobody on board, just literally a dummy, a crash test dummy, and I think they had a Snoopy on there, a stuffed Snoopy. And then they have these guys going up to go around the moon, and then the next time we go up with this Artemis rocket, it will be its third flight ever, will take them to the moon, and they'll land on the moon. I don't know how long they're planning on staying, but it's cool. And it was like this with Apollo. 3, 2, 1, you're done. I think we had Apollo 7 that just stayed in orbit and tested out the rocket. Then we had Apollo 8 that went all the way to the moon and came back. We had Apollo 9 that tested the lunar lander in Earth's orbit, like 100 miles above Earth. They were flying around this thing. Apollo 10, they brought the whole kit and caboodle to the moon but didn't land on it. Apollo 11, they landed on the moon. That's 4 trial runs, and then you do it for real. I know people who go through more training for their driver's test, right? I did. In months of preparation, you know what I mean? And you had to have a permit, and then you get there. But to get the driver's license by yourself, that was a big deal. And and a lot of people failed that test. A lot of people failed that test. All right. Is there anything else? I think I want to hear this, and this was a little bit controversial. What President Trump tweeted the other day. And the man on the seat right now, the number one administration official in the public spotlight, is Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War. Cut 18, please. Cut 18.
Hold on back here. Yesterday in the President's Truth Social, he threatened to wipe out a civilization. That statement elicited a huge response in America. If Iran did not come to the table and make a deal yesterday by the deadline, was the president really prepared to wipe out Iran entirely?
Like I said, we had a target set locked and loaded of infrastructure, bridges, power plants. Remember, this is a terror regime. The military regime used all of these things for dual use to fund their military, to fund their terror campaigns. We had a lot of legitimate targets. They knew exactly the scope of what we were capable of. We hit some military targets on Karg, which is a bit of a signal. They can't defend it. And so Iran ultimately understood their ability, their future, to produce, to generate power, to fuel their terrorist regime was in our hands, was in President Trump's hands. That's why they came to the table. He ultimately said, we can take it all from you. Your ability to export energy will be taken away. And the United States military has the ability to strike those things with impunity. That type of threat is what brought them to the place where they effectively say, hey, okay, we want to cut this deal.
What do you think? Sounds good to me. Now, there's Hegseth, actually, about the whole thing with his tough talk. And this has to be addressed, all right? This has to be addressed. It's a legitimate question. Let's see what he has to say, because he's like, we're not going to show any mercy. We're going to pound them into oblivion. Death will rain from the sky. You know, there's a time and a place and a person to deliver that message. It's debatable whether or not it's the Secretary of Defense or War. All right, you know what? It was actually a legitimate question, all right? And he didn't have to get nasty about it. These guys drive me crazy as well. I can't stand the fake news. But to castigate them like that, look, Pete, you talk tough, all right? You got to square this stuff. It's okay. It's okay. You got to be a little bit thoughtful, and you got to. There's a way to handle this stuff. I did notice this. They had the briefing at 8 in the morning. 8 in the morning. I mean, geez. That's not a lot of time to get your stuff together. There's a thoughtful, better answer to that question. But anyway, it's nitpicking. The deal is done so far. It could fall apart. You know what I want? I want to hear from Mark Levin. Now, Mark Levin, who's a major supporter of this campaign and a major supporter of President Trump, I genuinely don't know. I heard some murmurings that he wasn't happy that we stopped. I am happy. I think we did the right thing when we started this thing, and by ending it for the time being, that's right as well. So I've been on board with Mark Levin, but I am very curious if he's all right. Well, listen, Hezbollah is in Lebanon. All right. They're firing those missiles from Lebanon. I don't think Mark is going to get everything he wants. All right. But I think we're going to get a lot of what he wants. I'm satisfied. I'll be back.
Thanks for listening to The Greg Kelly Show. You can hear The Greg Kelly Show weekdays at 12:15 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder, what the heck is going on here?
How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Tap the banner or visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.